know the aviation minister has said at different times, and you have also corroborated that position as to the need for public-private partnership in order to drive the transformation of these airports that we're looking at. Where are we on the concessioning of major airports across the country?
Okay, so I'm glad we're all on the same page that private sector participation is required. A hybrid model is what we've clearly preached for, and that's making sure that for the commercial activities, we're able to commercialize those. You just spoke about the concessions. The Honorable Minister has been working very closely with us at FAAN to make sure that the concession process is thorough. There has been a review. So, of course, there has been a review of the last concession process as well. There were some adverts that were put in the paper, which were more of notices a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, largely around interest or intent in those airports that were looking to concession. There's some advisory work that is also ongoing in terms of project development and the economics. Now, when it comes to concessions, it's one thing to potentially find a private sector partner to work with you on those concessions. But what is more important is to make sure that you sort of have the same goals. You're able to potentially trash out some of the issues that have potentially arose and will continue to arise around, look, what do you do with the people? The Honourable Minister has clearly said there will be no jobs lost. Of course, that also requires conversation in terms of the economics and the financials of what happens. So currently we're in project development stage.
All right. Quite recently at an aviation roundtable meeting, you were there as well. And, stakeholders recommended a range of measures, and those included the establishment of an aviation finance bank, which would be a single-digit lending rate for the sector, and of course the exemption of local refineries from taxation related to production of Jet A1 fuel. What are your thoughts on this?
So while I respect the Aviation Roundtable heavily in terms of their thoughts and their enormous contribution to the sector, I'm actually not of the opinion that we set up another institution for financing. I think that we have a lot of institutions that exist today who are finance houses. So, for example, you have some of the commercial banks, even though we know that financing from commercial banks tend to be at double-digit rates. We also have some DFIs, they're private equity institutions that we can look at. What I do think we need is really more specialized banking or specialized financing that we can leverage. We also need to consider things that would help us improve the financing environment. So some sort of financial instruments, credit guarantees, for example, or backstops for the industry. So my focus will rather be on specialized financing and potential credit guarantees to support that.
All right, let's talk about runways. What is the current state? And please provide some level of clarification, about the controversy of the runway construction at 532 billion naira earmarked for the construction of a second runway in Abuja and rehabilitation of other runways in designated airports.
Thank you very much for that question. I believe I've also just received a number of messages following our outing yesterday at the National Assembly. So I'd like to clarify two things. We have a number of runways in Nigeria today. So we'd mentioned to you that there are 22 airports that are owned by the federal government. We also support some airports that are owned by the state. I did make specific reference to airports who had runways that had exceeded their lifespan. The average lifespan of a runway is about 20 to 25 years. A lot of our runways in Nigeria have actually exceeded that time, meaning that we've had them for 30 plus 35 years. And what it means is that we need to actually reconstruct those runways. The reconstruction of those runways, the 580 billion that I initially mentioned, is actually for over 17 runways, and it's not just the runways. It includes the runways, it includes some perimeter roads, it includes fencing. So I've seen some commentary where people are saying, what do they need all of this money for? I encourage you, please just look at Google if you're in the construction business or in the aviation business, to try and understand what it means to build runways, taxiway links, apron expansion work that we need to do, and of course to make sure that we put a safe environment together for everything that happens on the air side. Now, the reference that the Honorable Minister made while we were at the National Assembly yesterday was specific to the second runway project that is happening in Abuja. That project was initially awarded to some consultants and contractors by previous administrations. I believe that from conversations with the ministry, the scope of that project has changed. There's also been price variations, of course, which is affected by the scope and of course FX fluctuations. There's some additional information that has come on which the minister has, which of course provides him with a lot of discomfort around the numbers that has been provided to him. And to that effect, he has largely come out to say, instead of accepting a figure that has been provided to him, he needs to provide more oversight and more scrutiny. And I believe the question is, what is happening with that? Who's handling that project? The project was initially being handled by the ministry, of course, with support from the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, which I head. We have had several engagements with the ministry, and we will continue to have that in the next coming weeks so that there's some clarity around that project.